Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are just giving everybody a minute to come in. Thanks for joining today. We have a great audience and people represented from all different companies, regions, titles, and that's exactly what we were intending for today. So we'll kick this off in just about 30 seconds. Hey, Mills, what's up? Good to see you. All right, we have a ton to cover, so I'm not going to give too much of a grace period to people coming in late. My name is Andrew Silgren. I'm the director of product marketing here at Ixopay, and I still can't believe that part of my job is to sit around with some of the smartest people in the room and ask them good questions here. And so to that end, joining me today are Jill Willard, our CTO here at Ixopay, Marco Conte, who leads our payments intelligence here, also the founder of Congrify, a payments intelligence engine that we acquired last quarter. And Dwayne, payment strategist, consultant. You probably need the least introduction of the three of us, but thank you everyone for joining us today. We think we have the intelligence side covered, the technical side covered, the high level market overview with Dwayne, the work you're doing with the merchants here, and we think that's going to make a nice cohesive whole for what we have planned today. So to that end, what are we going to cover here? Quick orienting slide. We can't have an agentic commerce webinar without at least a little bit of context and orientation here. Then we're going to get into what that actually means for the payment stack. Like what kind of re-architecture, going back to the title of this webinar, are we talking about? Get into some of the risks, not too much FUD, but some of the risks and questions that might have participants in the market right now hedging their bets, cover some of the protocols, but then importantly, where those protocols sit for different market participants at different levels of maturity or sectors. So instead of just that table of protocols, how to really think about them and prioritize them within your architecture here. And then we'll talk about phase zero, how to scale and grow. So if that sounds good, let's kick it off here with, again, that orientation slide. And Jill and I were joking just a minute ago how the orienting slide probably changes every week, every 2 weeks now, just to establish the new floor that we're working off of. So Jill, let me hand it over to you.
Yeah, so it's moving really fast. I think we all feel that for sure. I think last year, e-commerce, just not agentic commerce, but e-commerce increased 11%. And they're attributing about 70% of that to LLMs. So traffic starting on Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity. MasterCard is estimating 50% of all commerce will be agentic in 2030. Seems like a huge number. Things are moving fast. But I think right now, as we look across what's actually happening in the market, there's a lot of talk about AI transacting, but really in the small cases that's happening, it's happening through browser automation and bots. When it comes to real agentic commerce using these newly defined protocols in mature places, we're really sitting here between AI recommends and AI initiates. So, but the question isn't if we'll get to transact, it's how fast will we get to transact. And I think you see the market moving towards that way. Stripe came out today with machine payments using the PX402 protocol. So you see the industry like moving quickly towards transact. But love your perspective, Dwayne, on how fast you think the industry is moving towards transact and what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I think overall, what we're seeing with merchants is everybody's in that investigative stage, right? Everybody wants to be a part of it. Nobody wants to be left behind, especially. So, what we're seeing is that a lot of project groups, a lot of companies are internally really looking into how will this affect us as a business? What do we need to do? Are we ready for it? Is our platform able to be crawled? Is it able to be accessed? Do we need to make sure that we collaborate with the different protocols and the different platforms, as well as what type of conversations are we having with our payment service providers or our acquirers, and what will they allow us to do? And especially in that context of tokenization, orchestration, and intelligence, they just want to know, are we ready for it? So probably the biggest thing that I'm seeing is a lot of questions, a lot of different and new questions that are being asked, especially within this space where it's not just about will a transaction go through, but also what type of transaction and how do you best optimize for it and make sure that we as a merchant are able and to process those transactions. So that's what I'm really seeing the most of.
And the underlying motivations of all the different people you're listening to. And I mean, just this morning we saw Stripe with some new announcements. If anyone else is a LinkedIn junkie like me and probably a few others here. So let's shift that context conversation to the actual payment stack and where this sits, because as we were preparing for this, one of the most substantive things that we talked about is that we're not reinventing the stack. This isn't this rip and replace kind of exercise that I think I in the early days of this was fearing it might be. So let's look at it from kind of a vertical stack perspective, if we could.
Yeah, so I think, the big thing is if agentic commerce required the rewrite of an entire payment stack, it couldn't move as fast as the industry needs it to move. And so what you're seeing is a real intentional layering of the agentic commerce stack and showing that, we're putting some things on top of the stack and then we're modifying the edges of the stack. So the edges of the flow around risk rules, around policy enforcements, and really around monitoring and escalation. Those are the edges of the stack. And then the top of the stack. And really at the top of the stack is all around intent. So intent meaning who is acting. So is it an agent acting? Do they have authority to act? Who are they acting? For whom are they acting? What are they allowed to do and under what constraints and based on what authorization? And so this whole idea of managing the intent becomes a new piece of the payment stack. And it's a piece that currently is really being delegated to the merchants and to the PSPs. We did have a conversation with MasterCard around, their thoughts that eventually that intent management will move. Some of it will move down to the issuer side, but they've acknowledged that currently, as it states today, this is really being, put on to the merchants and the PSPs to manage this intent layer.
And so hearing about the new handshakes, the keys, the new data set that we're preparing with, and there's both the critical functions for authorization and validation, but then also this intent data set that's going to be critical for merchants just to understand because it's buyer behavior too. And so when we talk about monitoring, it's understanding the critical signals, but also that supporting data set of consumer behavior and consumer intent here. And Marco, if I could hand it off to you right now to help us unpack both the risks and the opportunities with the intelligence, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think you said something really correct. I mean, this is going to be a big change, right? And it's going to come very, very fast and very quickly. So having the right insights and information available at your fingertips is going to be fundamental, right? So you want to see if now you are at 0 point something percent and you suddenly get to a 10% of agentic commerce transaction, how is this going to impact your fraud, your authorization rates, your risk decisions? There is quite a lot there. Today, obviously, there are still some open items. What we see, chargebacks, right, is going to be one of the main ones because behaviors are going to change. So now we have users that we know how they behave, right? We know how to recognize a good customer from a fraudster or a friendly fraud from a real fraud. But when agents are going to come and do transactions and we're going to have different data points, we are going to know that this is coming from OpenAI, this is coming from Perplexity, but we don't know how people are behaving because they are delegating the purchase. So it's going to change a lot. And we expect as well rules to change here. Now, as Jill, you were saying, the burden is more on merchants and PSPs. I would say from a liability shift perspective is much more on merchants. I haven't seen anything really beside a few protocols talking about sharing it a little bit with issuers. So it's going to be quite a big part. The second item is what we call here product misalignment. So AI models, for as good as they can be, they still have the risk of hallucination. So we always make the joke: what happens if I'm trying to buy red shoes and I get blue shoes, and the agent has decided that? So there can be something happening there. It's going to be very interesting to see how to handle those cases, how often they're going to happen, if there's going to be a real risk, and then obviously like this affects all the disputes management processes. So a lot of things are going to change, which means that having control and access to the data to prevent those scenarios is going to be fundamental, as this can impact obviously like customer satisfaction, revenues, relationships with providers as well. If suddenly your chargebacks or disputes are gonna skyrocket, so control on data, I think, is gonna be fundamental.
And so, Dwayne, take us into the boardroom conversations, right? Or putting on your consultant hats, protecting anonymity, of course. Are these the risks that are on the dossier or are on the agenda for merchants, and how are they thinking about them?
Yeah, absolutely, right. I think if we look at what's just happened in the last year, right, a lot of things, especially when it comes to chargebacks, have drastically changed within the industry. So those changes on top of new changes make people very nervous, right? How do we actually deal with it? How do we protect ourselves from what's possibly there? Some go very drastically and say, look, we're not ready for this, so we're not going to allow it. You see that with mega merchants that are even blocking everything out until they figured it out themselves before they open up their doors to allow agentic shopping to happen even. But then you have other merchants who are looking at it and saying, look, we have our chargebacks under control. We want to do it because we believe that if we can be an early adoption in this, it can actually benefit from it. But you have to make that analysis as well, is that, hey, if this does lead to an influx of chargeback, what is the impact on your business going to be? Then there's also indeed the hallucination aspect of it, right? If this is going to lead to more refunds needing to happen or more returns that are going to happen, how's that going to impact our business from that side? The side that I see a lot more ease in it is especially digital products that are much easier to do. Of course, that's not really where agentic shines and it really becomes a great product to have. But overall, that's where a lot more willingness to take risk and to implement things is coming across with it. Also, the human in the loop aspect continues to be part of that conversation as well. Is that saying, look, the LLMs is allowing us to be found in a different way than it used to. It's actually driving down costs for us because we're getting much more search results of that, like Jill already mentioned. But it's also the overall picture of it is saying, well, we get more search. What do we then have to do? And do we need to put a human in the loop as well? So coming up with those recommendations, but then still providing it to the customer to then give that final say, so that you at least reduce the risk of chargeback, product misalignments, and disputes as well. So those are a lot of the conversations that I see merchants having. And again, the way that they're reacting to it is they're either doing absolutely nothing, sort of like afraid to move, or they're trying new things out or trying to limit the scope of what they're trying out, specific product sets as well. And then you have some who are just saying, look, whatever the platform allows us to do, we're just going to go with it because it might benefit us in the long term.
And looking into my crystal for you personally, I can see that you helping us learn the lessons of those early adopters is going to be something I think many of us are going to be looking to you to help get the right lessons and understand to build correctly here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm also seeing that yes, maybe there's the risk of my VAMP ratio all of a sudden going into the red zone, in no time. But that also, a lot of these risks are the creeping, attritive slippage and leakage of basis points going over time, or slow product misalignment and things like that, which are the slow creeping risks that we don't always appreciate, until they've gotten too bad.
Absolutely.
So,
Jill, go for it.
Well, there's a question in the chat, so I was gonna just kind of address what I know about 3DS and VCAS. And from my conversations with the different issuers, like, they're gonna be leaning pretty heavily into click to pay to support agentic transactions. I don't know exactly how that looks, but I know that that's the talks that I've been in around these sorts of strong authentication methods from that side of things. This slide is super busy, but I really wanted to get into what does it mean to kind of support a protocol? Like, which one do I pick? If I'm going to start my journey and say I want to start using agentic transactions, like which protocol do I pick? And while, in some cases you may decide like I want to use Gemini, so I'm going to use UCP, or I'm going to use OpenAI. So I'm going to use, ACP. I think it's really important to understand that these protocols actually can work together, and they're also kind of a maturity of where you are from a technical capability perspective, but also where you are from a risk perspective. So you can think of each of these as like kind of a capability ladder. And as you go up the rungs, you are introducing more technical, you need more technical expertise, and you're introducing a little bit more risk to your system. So UCP and ACP are really playing around with agents assist, discovery recommendations, humans approved. They're really focused right now on humans in the loop. UCP assumes intent because the human signed in, while ACP is really talking about intent writing, like the payment token. So if you have a payment token and intents attached to that payment token as metadata. AP2 is a Google protocol that came out before they came out with the UCP protocol, and it really is focused on wallet-based configurations, while APT2, it came out first. I think they realized it was a little bit maybe too advanced for where people were and where the industry was, so they rolled out UCP. And my understanding is that AP2 is actually going to also be implemented behind UCP as a way to kind of create that execution layer as we move from AI recommending to AI transacting. And then if you look at Visa's protocol around their trusted agent protocol, they're really, really focused on this idea of all these bots happening, and can we identify the bots, and can we identify if we trust the bots, and if each bot has an identity, then can you solve agents transacting in that way and make it safer? So that's kind of where the card brands have kind of focused their protocols. And then you have the PX402, which is probably the most fully programmatic and highest automation protocol, and really focused mostly on the crypto world. So that's kind of, if you're looking at like, where do we start? Which protocols should we support? It's kind of a high level understanding of like what each protocol does and why you might pick it. Dwayne, like what protocols do you see emerging as like the leaders in, people's conversations of what they're talking about implementing?
Yeah. So I work across the spectrum, right? So it's not just merchants. I work with merchants. I work with issuers, PSPs, and acquirers, and it really depends on where you are within that stack. You're absolutely right. Like a lot of the things that came out very early on were setting the foundation of what's actually down to come later on. Is really the fundamental technical components that needed to be built first. So with AP2, but also very quickly with Visa's trusted agent protocol, as well as MasterCard's Agent Pay as well. So those were really sort of like foundational levels where especially acquirers were very first of all said, hey, we need to work with Visa, need to work with MasterCard because we're an acquirer for them. So that's really where a lot of them started out. AP2 was sort of like that second layer that they said, hey, we need to be able to integrate with this and having that. So what I'm seeing on the other side, merchants aspect, indeed, is what you're saying. Discovery and assist is really sort of like where it's at right now, where merchants are saying, look, we might not be in this agentic summer as Visa might have called it, right? But we're definitely at that early stages. So how do you make sure that we're not locked out of the search volume or the discovery that's happening at the moment? So you're seeing a lot of adoption on the merchant side, especially on that ACP and UCP, in integrating with them and making sure that they're in those things, experimenting, developing new applications within that. So making sure that they have the discovery and assist in that. The second layer, the things that I'm starting to see right now is really, okay, how do you start integrating so that we can actually make some of those transactions? You see with some of the other platforms, OpenAI and Shopify rolling things out. So they're already embedding that into the platforms already, and making sure that over 1 million merchants already have that access as well. So that's sort of like what I'm seeing. So individually, discovery and discovery and assist, agentic commerce protocol, sort of like the second, and then it goes further down. On the other side of the spectrum, you see the highly technical stuff, the trusted agent protocol, Agentic, as well as the agents AP2 protocol of Google, sort of like really getting that adoption.
We've seen these framed as who's building them, the specific pain points that they're designed to solve within the life cycle, and where they fit in the space. But one of the things very interesting to me was framing this from a product catalog standpoint, and just as a new approach or new lens to look at this through, if you're thinking about where and how to orient.
Yeah, I think that was, a big surprise to a lot of these LLMs and a lot of these people implementing these protocols as they first came out. Nobody focused on the product catalog, and you see now UCP really defines the product catalog in their protocol, because this is a huge obstacle to agentic payments. And so it's important as you're picking a protocol to really understand not just your risk appetite or your payment stack technical depth, but also what state is your product catalog in, and you may need to choose a different choice depending on your product catalog itself.
So yeah, another way to think about it here. So let's talk about sort of feet on the ground. I think I'm as guilty as any of being lost in the concepts and the calculus in the space right now. But what I'd like to do is work with the panel to really build this phase 0 today. And what is the foundation, whatever I've found appealing from the 8 slides that you've seen before, or directions that you might want to go, or maybe what's already on your roadmap. Let's start with the cornerstones here.
So yeah, we talked about intent, right? Intent is kind of the key piece here. The agent's now this 5th player in the transaction. And so how do you determine that it's doing what it's expected to be doing, for who it's supposed to be doing it for, and what it's allowed to do? So what we're seeing is, regardless of protocol, intent needs to be captured, it needs to be understood, and it needs to be replayable. So each protocol has a different expectation around intent. But storing intent as metadata alongside the payment token is a key foundational piece. This is core to ACP. It's a concept that they introduced, but really kind of evolves across the platforms as you think about, how do I replay this transaction from a token, from a payment perspective, as well as the intent behind the payment or behind the transaction. So in addition, tightly coupling intent to a single PSP token or protocol could backfire over time. There's a lot of PSPs that don't actually allow you to store metadata inside or alongside of a token. So it's important to understand like your PSP landscape and whether or not that's a possibility. But we are seeing this emerge as a best practice. So storing these things in a third-party, protocol-agnostic way really allows you to have proper encapsulation from a design pattern perspective. Like, you're not commingling how you store intent across different protocols or across a single PSP. And then that preserves your flexibility over time, because you know that as things evolve, someone's going to always ask you, why did this transaction get executed? And you want to be able to kind of trace that all the way back across your stack in a really nice, consistent, easy way. It was executed for this reason by this agent with this payment token, and that replayability will become really, really important as you start to scale agentic transactions. But Dwayne, from your perspective, what are you seeing around how people are implementing these protocols, and what they feel about intent capture?
Yeah, I think what it does mostly is it opens up really about, and I think Marco can probably really back me up in here as well, is that it's all about data, right? So we're talking about intent. We're talking about what used to be very structured data is now becoming a lot more unstructured type of data that now has an intent, right? It's a prompt that has been given that then needs to be stored. So one of the key things that I'm noticing right now is just the way that people are utilizing data at the moment, going from very structured databases to much more data warehouses, which combine both structured and unstructured data, having explainable AI as well. So being able to take an intent and actually say what's behind that intent and how do you take that unstructured data and store it into structured components so that if you do want to extract any type of business intelligence or any type of intelligence out there as well, you need to have that foundation right. And then it's also about the quality of that data and how it's being stored. So that's really one of the first things that I'm seeing, is that as everybody's thinking about how do we do the catalog and how do we make sure that these transactions happen, a lot of those things are already in place as far as what happens further down the line. But it's really this intent has opened up this conversation about data and control and access of that and being able to interpret that a lot more. So again, across the spectrum, I'm seeing acquirers have to adapt to that, going from very rigid post-SQL databases to now actually for the first time, or for something that they might have been putting off for a long time, having to go to a much more of a hybrid database where it's much more unstructured and structured data, and then putting that level on top of that and modeling that data and making sure that they can extract those components. So that's what I'm really seeing on that side. On the merchant side, it's really okay. Again, also, how do we store that data? Who's storing it? Are we storing it ourselves, or is somebody storing it on our behalf? Is this something that will sit with the PSP or the acquirer, or do we have it? I think this is very much similar to the whole network tokenization aspect and how we've seen that journey as well go from PSP tokens to acquired tokens to network tokens. And I think we're sort of like in a parallel when it comes to that as well.
Marco, what are you picking up in terms of at some level, we have the incredible stronger capacity to refine data with the agentic capabilities. But what would be your advice on integrating intent data into the existing data lake of payments and payments adjacent data?
Yeah. So I mean, this we gotta see it as a step before like an authentication. Like right now, you already have like strong customer authentication in some markets from users. So it's kind of similar. It's a step that should come before, which is fundamental to be stored. Right now, the question is like how structured are going to be those data, as Dwayne, as you're saying. So we can't expect like a very simple data model there. So companies need to store this. There is no question. And then it's gonna be like how to verify the intents. I mean, there are different ways to do that, but it's gonna be more a post factum process, right? So we were discussing before like chargebacks and everything, which is not, let's say, so much from a security perspective, but let's imagine that the intent was wrong, right? Because like the user was asking about one thing and he gets another thing. So you need to go back, you need to ensure traceability, you need to ensure that you can verify. So it's new data points that must be stored. Those are a bit unstructured data points. It might be JSON, simple JSONs coming there that you need to put in some tables and other things. And we know that many companies, with the amount of data that you have in payments, are not able to connect the dots all the time. So right now, maybe it's a time where data lakes can be cleaned a little bit. I mean, we've seen this over the last years that companies are putting more attention there. But definitely, it's not something that you cannot have in your strategy to make sure that you have this new piece of information coming in and saved on your side.
So if we could summarize maybe the two words that we see as really the pillars of this architecture we're building, we're thinking about tokenization and intelligence. And I'd like to linger for just a few more seconds on this phase zero idea. To Dwayne, ask you, in your conversations, what have been the aha moments as you are sitting down and thinking about the right foundation here?
Sorry, so what's the foundation of?
So as we're talking about phase zero and preparing, the the best foundation for building agentic capabilities. In your conversations with merchants, have there been recurring sort of corrective advice that you've given, or aha moments for the merchants and their product team at all that you can socialize?
Well, I would say, look, you don't have to bet the whole house on agentic, right? Meaning that I'm very bullish on it. I know that it's going to have an impact on it. I think a lot of the projections that we're seeing from different companies, from your big four consultancy companies to even the scheme saying, hey, this is going to be that big. I think for every merchant, really depending on, again, their product catalog, their own strategy, where they want to end up with, the type of products that they're selling, and also their own technical capabilities of doing that. I think more and more, if we look at the ecosystem and the different types of merchants, you have merchants who are on a closed platform where everything is already being done for them, right? There's not really much that I can do for them or tell them to say, hey, you should have this, or they're not even having their own aha moment. They're just saying, well, we continue to do what we do and the platform will make us ready. But then there's this long tail of all of these companies who have different types of platforms that they're working with. I think especially there, this is extremely important to understand that standing still or doing nothing is actually, the wrong move. You should be involved. You should make it a part of your conversation, a part of your roadmap. You don't have to roll out everything at once, but you have to make choices at this moment. Are these things that I'm going to do myself, or do I have a partner in a PSP, an orchestrator, or somebody else who's doing it for me? And if so, am I getting that information in? Am I making sure that it's part of my roadmap so that we're implementing it? Am I doing a proof of concept? Are we allowing to test this out and see where this goes? And I think that's where I see a lot of the merchants and saying, okay, that's really where we should have this level of experimentation across the board. As a data scientist as well, I've been telling people you have to experiment every single day, not just from your authorization rate optimization or lowering your cost, but especially with new initiatives and new things that could just open up a whole new market for you. And it could be that agentic could be that for a merchant who's always been, maybe has been flat for a long time, all of a sudden sees this way to really be an early adopter in this space and really can grow within that. So that's really what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing, let yourself bring your intention and your curiosity here. There's that great Eisenhower quote that some of you may know about, never confuse movement with action, right? Yeah. And I think about that a lot, even in, what I'm doing in my day-to-day on the job here. But it sounds like this is just as worthy of your intention and curiosity right now as anything else on your roadmap.
Absolutely.
Before we start this slide, I was going to just answer one of the questions in the chat, like why not simply have all the protocols code to one unified API so merchants can access them without having to build to each one. So I think in an ideal world, that would be amazing. But if you look at the history of payments, it's never happened. And we like to make things complicated. And the greatest part about standards is there's so many standards sometimes. And I think, the reality is that the people that are going to control the protocols, that are going to control agentic commerce, are going to control a large economies at scale, and you're going to end up with competing protocols because nobody's going to kind of like lean into a single protocol the same way things like maybe aligned around MCP. And I think there's more established players in the payment space, and that's why you're seeing all the different players kind of rush to build out their protocols and kind of see which one takes hold within the market. I don't know if any of you guys have insights on that question as well.
Well, I think you already mentioned it, right? Like we're already seeing it. We're probably not even naming it, but maybe I could coin it over here. I think protocol orchestration is going to be key along the way, right? Like not every company has the engineering capabilities. Not every company wants to dive into it. So just like how we've seen orchestration with just integrating multiple PSPs, again, all different APIs, different technologies, different features, different capabilities. I think the level of complexity that it adds to this is not just integrating a protocol that works for payments, but it's also for wallets, it's for all these other things. So we'll probably see either companies come out and wanting to be a protocol orchestrator and sit in front of that and then say, just integrate with us. We'll do everything from that on side, and that's what you'll have. But then I was thinking, traditional orchestration or orchestration that we're already seeing, tokenization within that as well. So I think it will converge with different aspects along the line. I think we're just at such an early stage right now that we need to allow the technologies and the different protocols to develop. The one thing that I'm always careful for is that we as merchants, as payments companies, need to be a part of those conversations so that we don't have third parties or technical companies developing these protocols without our I think that's the only thing that I always tell people to be involved, be a part of the conversation, even if you're not designing or owning the protocol yourself. Be a part of that conversation. Be very early on. Be able to provide feedback within that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as like how can an orchestrator make this easier, I think to your point, everybody's emerging into this idea of, having a system that's going to allow you to orchestrate over multiple of these protocols, and those are in development, I think, across multiple companies. Another thing that makes it easier is that idea of having a third party or PSP agnostic token, having that as a baseline and storing your token and the intent metadata alongside of that will kind of help you be flexible over time. If you talk about like core design principles for scaling agentic commerce, I think that all ties in, right? This intent as a center of gravity, this idea of having a PSP agnostic token that also stores intent as metadata alongside of that is your kind of audit anchor. How do you replay the transaction? How do you understand what the transaction was or what it is? Having the different protocols logic, not really tightly coupled into your code, but as an adapter layer that kind of, encapsulates that from the rest of your system, or even differently, being able to delegate that to a third party and delegate that complexity to a third party, depending on how technically advanced your payment stack is super important. And the same thing for, all of your business constraints and your pricing and your product catalogs is encapsulating that away from the protocols as well, and making sure that lives and is centered within your system in a certain way. And then monitoring and intelligence, being able to know, did my chargeback spike? Are my authorization rates being impacted? What's happening with my payment systems? I think we've gotten better as payment providers and as merchants with monitoring as e-commerce has taken hold, but payment sometimes is like a set and forget. And then, you really do need to be constantly monitoring your traffic and understanding what's happening, with your payment traffic and your payments as a company. And then I always tell my team, there's always going to be failures. There's going to be problems. You need to fail fast and you need to fail small. And I think in this case, we have fail human, right? So as things go wrong, as AI is transacting, you really need to think about like, how do I create a human fallback when things go wrong and things are failing.
Did we capture all these, Dwayne? Would you add anything to this for the design principles, or somebody that you're working with who you feel has it right, that might have some white space here?
I think overall I captured that. I think I call it autonomous risk, right? Where the risk aspect is also something that you really have to take care of. I think we're seeing this unprecedented creation of data within this space. I think Marco mentioned it already in one of his opening statements, is that new data points are being created across all of this. And how are we dealing with that, right? It's not an individual with a device fingerprint anymore. Now it's a virtual machine that's spinning things up, is going across the website, throwing things in a cart, checking it out with a token. how are you dealing that from a risk perspective, right? How do you deal with that? So I think that to me is also a part that when you're designing for that is also understanding, hey, who's on top of that? Who is able to understand that? Or what are we doing right now? Or are we deploying our old fraud system on a new potential fraud problem that we're seeing? And I think that's probably the one thing that I would add to this within that. But you can tell that that's part of monitoring and intelligence as well. So I think it's just the risk aspect that I would highlight probably a little bit more. That's really going to be important as a design principle and understanding whenever you're trying to scale. Because if you go from 0 to 1 million of those agentic transactions, you want to make sure that fraud and chargebacks and disputes is not going to be something that you have to deal with.
And then just also from the question in the chat, can we get a real life example of how this could be used of a person making a purchase? So I think the most obvious example is integrating to ACP or UCP and then making your stuff known within the Gemini or in the OpenAI, LLMs. But all of these protocols really allow you to advertise to agents that you are taking agentic transactions. So if I implemented the ACP protocol, for example, I believe there's an agent.txt that allows you to advertise that I'm accepting agentic transactions and I'm accepting, ACP agentic transactions. And then, that's not really happening today a lot, but you can see it kind of moving that way. Like you've got the OpenClaw stuff that's happening. And so all of these agents are doing things on behalf of users and developers now, but you're seeing developers build things on top of OpenClaw. So I see a world very quickly where somebody develops something on top of OpenClaw, and now you have agents outside of OpenAI or outside of Gemini that are now attempting to transact on your system if you're advertising that particular protocol and being able to push traffic that way. So is it a real life this moment? That's really happening through browser bots, as we kind of said earlier, but that's kind of where it's moving. It's either within the marketplace or even something brand new, as we've seen things evolve over the last few weeks.
We've talked a lot about just in the last couple slides about having that safety hatch, right? And this, whether it's from a defensive perspective, like protecting your downside risk, the tracing, the audit trails, things like that, or the key intelligence that's going to inform your product here. And so, Marco, could you double click on where safety and tracing comes into the conversation here?
Yeah. So basically, like here, we need to keep in mind that we have an infrastructure where like tracing is fundamental, right? And with all those protocols, who's gonna do the heavy lifting and the hard job? So if we bring an orchestrator or somebody in the middle that is gonna bring everything together, that can be one part that can help to really make sure that like all the critical data points are coming there. So extended payloads, the possibility to see like the intents and everything like in one place. So making sure that there would be cases where new information would be questioned, right, in post factum scenarios. So like after transaction is happening, you need to make sure like that you can see how the agent was behaving or what the agent was looking for. So those are non-negotiables anymore. Like we know that some companies looking at being, let's say, lower risk than some others have, let's say, a bit of softer approaches on risk because they're not really fraud prone or anything else. But here now we are talking about expanding this to a different type of identity management. And sure, you can verify the agents and do a lot of things, but the intent part is really changing the way of we should understand payments. So those are, once again, non-negotiables. You need to decide as a merchant if you can build this by yourself, if you can rely on a third party. But this is part of the new agentic commerce technology and data stack that you have within a company.
So we're going to begin bringing it home right now, and I'd invite everyone in the audience right now to think about what's been coming up for you, and use the Q&A we have here. We'd love to hear what's on your mind and give you the best responses we can. But to summarize about the path forward. We gave some ground rules about how to think about the different protocols, where they might fit within your payment stack, and what might be worthy of getting a space on your roadmap. How you can build for discovery, and how, from our perspective, the pillars that are going to drive a successful agentic commerce debutante are the tokenization, the flexible data ownership and visibility, and then the intelligence system that's going to capture all the relevant signals here, and help you make sense of it. And with those two in place, that you're going to create this positive feedback loop, where you have validated decision making, and the monitoring and the perspective over these new blocks on top of your payment stack that's going to drive success for you. And so if we could leave you with just a few things: intelligence, non-negotiable. The tokenization benefits, both from the data security and from the intent perspective, are going to be the high octane fuel that's going to drive success over the next few quarters as you build that phase 0 or that phase 1. And just a reminder that we are at the beginning here, and agentic payments are the beginning of this new channel that we're constructing here. And if I could just go down the line here, starting with you, Jill, about anything that you'd leave if someone takes nothing else from the conversation, what would you leave them with here?
I would say this kind of echo what you're saying. This is just the beginning, and I think there's a lot of noise in the market and things are moving quickly, but I think just 2026 is the year to be strategic and to dip your toe in the water and do some proof of concepts and some alphas and really understand where is it that you should play and where do these things best fit into your company and into your stack, and don't let everybody else rush you, but make strategic and kind of coherent decisions, but do start something.
Dwayne, how about you?
I think understanding your customers is probably the most important step that you can take, right? I think we as a company, sometimes we see a new technology, we see a new innovation, we want to jump on it. I've been seeing a lot of questionnaires going out and actually asking actual customers, would you allow an agent to go shop for you? And what's the current state of that? I think more than anything, you need to be aware of what's the current state of how customers are thinking about it. Not to say that they will dictate your roadmap, but it's good to be informed and continuously to be informed so that you also know, what am I building on? Some of the research that I've seen is that a lot of customers are still very hesitant to let an AI just do the full thing and the full shopping for them. However, a lot of them already want to be that human in the loop. So that's what we're seeing with a lot of the discovery aspect of it is, I can let an AI go find me the different products and come bring me back the recommendations, and I'll finish up that transaction. However, that's going to change over time. It now might only be 3, 6, or 10%, depending on what, if that's in the US, in the UK, or whatever market you're in. Whereas other markets, for instance, in Asia, have higher levels of people with a willingness to let AIs shop on their behalf. So I think make sure that you're part of the understanding, or that you understand what your actual shoppers want, then start implementing and building those things out that serve those needs. Track that data, have the information, and continue to have that adoption phase for your own company, matching with what your customers actually want. And from time to time, you can push a little bit of innovation and say, hey, we're introducing this or we're introducing that. But I think that's one of the things that I would definitely tell merchants to really be aware of. And I think on the other side, for those who are building actual infrastructure components, acquirers, all of those other ones, same thing, right? You have to experiment. You have to take, even if it's 5 or 10% of your time budget, your engineers, and actually start looking at what's happening in the market, stay on track of it, build for it, experiment for it, make sure that your merchants can utilize it as well.
And Dwayne might have teed you up there, Marco, with the data, the visibility, and maintaining that. How would you build on that?
Yeah, I'll just reconnect to like what Dwayne was saying. Like, right now you might see people just searching you on AI searches, right? So if I would be a payment person, especially, I would go to my e-commerce or marketing team and ask to them, what do you see today? Because if today there is like 10% of searches, right, coming from OpenAI or Gemini or whoever, at a certain point, those will become payments as well. Those will become agentic payments. It's just a question that now, as a user, you might not feel comfortable because it's too early, maybe for some people, like cultural shifts, like age. There can be a lot of different things, but you know that there are already people searching, and then at the moment that those searches are going to be enabled in more, in more behaviors and habits of people, this is going to grow. So I will ask to everyone like that works with payments tomorrow, go and ask your e-commerce team or marketing team, right? And say, how many searches do we have? What is the percentage? And how did it evolve over the last 12 months? Because you will really see the shift at a certain point. And maybe like, are there some products which are driving, more searches than others? So you can prepare as well for a moment where things will happen. So that's my my takeaway, because the question is not if, it's simply when and how much for each year agentic commerce will be from a payments perspective.
And lastly, as we just want to thank everybody for attending, for giving us your time today. You know where to find us on LinkedIn, obviously. I know we have partners, PSPs, merchants, other adjacent service providers here. Just like we talked about, this is the beginning. We hope this is the beginning of the conversation as well. So anything that had you perked up for a minute or two, we would love to talk more about it. Dwayne even just mentioned the power of picking your team, right? Like working with the right people here. And so that's what I'd leave you with, is picking the right partners and getting the right people around the table for your organization. So with that, Jill, Dwayne, Marco, thank you so much for the time today and the collaboration that went into this. Always wonderful hearing your perspectives. And thank you everyone else for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.